Welcome to SMU Stories, the podcast where we dive into the journeys of remarkable alumni from Southern Methodist University who have excelled in the world of business. I'm your host, Mitch Brown, and each episode will uncover the secrets, challenges, and triumphs of this extraordinary individual. From entrepreneurs who've turned dreams into multi-million-dollar enterprises to executives leading global corporations, SMU has nurtured a community of innovators, leaders, and visionaries. Join us as we sit down with the alumni who have walked the same halls, studied in the same classrooms, and emerged as industry pioneers. Get ready for insights, inspiration, and actionable advice as we explore the unique SMU stories that have shaped the business landscape. Whether you're a current student, an aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the power of the SMU network, this podcast is for you. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's embark on a journey through the compelling narratives of SMU alumni who are making waves in the business world. This is SMU Stories. Let's begin. SMU Stories is brought to you by Security National Bank of Texas, SMU Cox School of Business, Morrison Seeger Venture Capital Partners, and Hilltop Property Tax. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to tell your SMU story. If you would, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Mitch, for having me. I'm Jessica Groshek. I am the Vice President of ESG and External Affairs at Cresta Fund Management. I am born and raised Dallas. I'm a true Dallas girly. And I did my undergrad at the University of Oklahoma. I have an undergrad in business, bachelor's of business in marketing. And then I did my M.B.A. at SMU, clearly, and finished that in 2019.
Amazing. So being from Dallas, we'll give you some grace, knowing that you probably had to get out of the town for a little bit to do your undergrad.
I didn't go too far.
But ultimately didn't go too far. Tell us about kind of your college selection process. What were you looking for in a school? What ultimately led you to pick OU, and what did you study while in school?
Sure. OU was really, proximity was one piece. It is, I think from where I lived at the time, it was actually closer to get to Norman, Oklahoma than it was to Austin, Texas. I wanted a football team. I got that in the University of Oklahoma. I was there during the Bob Stoops era with Adrian Pearson, and so it was a great time to be a Sooner. I don't know about that much right now, but it's a great time to be a Pony right now. So football was definitely a factor. I loved the campus. I will say, if you haven't been to University of Oklahoma, it is beautiful. There's the buildings are brick red, very similar to what SMU looks like. I felt in comparison to some of the Texas schools, it was a little more condensed on campus. Getting from the dorms to the business school and the classes was a much easier walking than what I experienced in visiting other schools. So that really is what led me there. I really wasn't sure what I was going to study or focus on. I think I changed my major from dentistry to business. And so, I started one way and completely went the other. In fact, I was in the sitting in a dental club meeting, and a dentist walked in and he said, "If you want to make money, go to the business school." And so I think that's when I was like, okay, I am changing my major. Right.
Yeah.
So from there, I, studied marketing. I enjoyed that piece of it. I also took some classes through OU's journalism program, which took some advertising classes. So that really played into some of the marketing endeavors that I was interested in, just the more on the creative side versus the research side.
And I imagine as we get later into the career, that marketing, advertising, some of that messaging and your ability to convey language was important for what you're doing now, right? As you're sharing sentiment of the business, connecting with your investor base.
Right.
And so part of some of the series that we do, right, we talked about this before, is the importance of sharing. Not every journey is, hey, I know I want to be a doctor, so I went to school, I want to be a doctor. It's kind of learning the path that gets you to the career you are. You graduated in 2009, so tough environment to try to find a job, whether it's marketing, business, kind of no matter what you aspire to be, that was going to be a tough landscape. How did you think about graduation? You picked the business school, kind of business is where you wanted to go. Walk us through kind of career selection post OU?
Yes. So to be quite honest, I just thought with a business degree, I could probably get a job somewhere, right? And it didn't necessarily matter where, as long as I had a job, and having just the general business knowledge was helpful. I did graduate at somewhat of a terrible time to land a job. I think from my friend group, probably 50% of us had a job post college, and the other 50 were looking or extended their college careers and graduate degrees. So it was interesting. I didn't land a job right away. It was a couple months until I secured a job at a nonprofit, which is the Pines Catholic Camp. And it was a summer camp that I actually attended as a child, and did some summertime work as a counselor at, and they were looking for a director of communications. And so it ironically worked because that was what my degree was in. And so I was able to, utilize my experience directly for the summer camp. So it was fun. I was based in Dallas for that. I did that for about 2 years. I enjoyed it, but working for a nonprofit is rewarding, but it's not necessarily monetarily rewarding. So I wanted to find something else to, start making some money as an individual.
Absolutely. And now we know you as a career energy professional. Where did that pivot come from, right? It seems in a short time frame, you went from maybe dentistry, marketing, communications, took your first job, and then walk us through kind of the Vistra family and kind of how you got plugged into that side of the business.
Sure. So it was actually a friend who was also then became a coworker. She reached out to her network and emailed, and I knew her actually from summer camp, and she was a former counselor herself. Also had the director of communications role a couple individuals before me, and she was at TXU Energy at the time. TXU Energy is a retail electricity brand here in Texas. At the time was under the Energy Future Holdings parent company. And she reached out to her network saying, I'm hiring. If you know anyone that might be interested, let me know. I responded, I was like, well, I might be interested myself. So I, met with her. We discussed the opportunity a little bit. It was a customer service role. And so that is how I got into TXU Energy and really into the Vistra family. And I say Vistra, that is the successor from Energy Future Holdings once they went into bankruptcy. So Vistra is now the parent company of TXU Energy and Luminant, et cetera. And throughout my career at Vistra, it was a 10-year career. I worked at the various companies in different roles.
And so how much did you know about Vistra, about the kind of the business of energy and kind of that space that you were then moving into?
I did not know a thing, Mitch. I think when you have a good network and you have someone advocate for you, it really is powerful. And so, that was really my way in. It wasn't because I was even interested in energy. It wasn't because I knew anything about power or electricity. Luckily, in that position, I was able to learn a lot. And throughout my career there, I learned a lot. Now, Vistra is, they do produce and sell power. So it was electron focused. And what I'm doing today, which we can get into later, is more molecule focused. So now kind of learning all of the aspects of the energy industry. And so, I think one thing to, I touched on the network, but one thing to also note is just like the aptitude to learn. I think that is really important and powerful as well in a career. And as long as you're willing to learn and putting in the effort and showing the effort, that can really move you and progress your career forward in any industry, whether you have the experience or not.
No, I'm glad you touch on that, because How did you approach that as someone who out of industry, you wanted to get your foot in the door, really just to kind of, again, maybe pivot out of the nonprofit world, get into, a new opportunity, but still probably thinking, I didn't plan to work in this space for 10 more years, or, how you got to now. How did you approach, attacking this full on your education process, and how did that coincide with your ability to work your way up and kind of move throughout the subsidiaries of businesses?
I think what's important is, again, just really showing that you want to learn, and are putting in the time to learn. So at TXU, I did customer service, and then I moved into a sales support type of role, under a team that was called Structured Transactions. And under that, we helped develop products. We looked at pricing. We did contract reviews for large business customers. And there I gained more perspective, and that was under the Luminant branch. There I gained more perspective in the relationship of interworking across the companies under the one Vistra. Okay. And from there, in addition to furthering my education, I think a big piece of what my next role there, which was investor relations, a big piece of that was that I gained knowledge of the various business units that I was then able to tell the story of how it worked to investors. And that was a big benefit in hiring me specifically for an investor relations role at Vistra. In my career at Vistra, I had a mentor, and he asked me one day, "When are you getting your MBA?" And I hadn't really thought about it. I couldn't necessarily quit my job and go do a 2-year program. It had to either be online or ended up, doing the professional program at SMU, which was nighttime, and while working. And so I kind of put that aside. He said it, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about, and wasn't really into it. Well, he kept asking me, "When are you getting your MBA? When are you getting your MBA?" So then I really took it to heart and really researched and started seeing what my options were. SMU, obviously being from Dallas, my mom and uncles were also graduates of SMU, and so we would attend football games when I was a child. And so it's always, ponies were always part of my life. And so
those football games probably scared you away, and that's why you picked OU, maybe the lack of crowd, but we're changing.
Exactly. And so I just knew of the network and reputation. And in addition, at the time, Vistra had just become a public company when I started my MBA journey, and they had also done a huge merger with a company called Dynegy. And internally, they weren't necessarily hiring new people. Usually when you acquire, downsize and lay off some people, and really see where your synergies lie. So they weren't hiring, they weren't making big moves across, people weren't making big moves across the company. I wasn't really sure what my next role was going to be. So in addition to this mentor kind of guiding me towards doing an MBA, I also, one of the reasons to do it was to see what could I do post MBA, what could my career look like, and whether that was at Vistra or not. And so I knew developing a network in Dallas that SMU was the place to do that. And so I honestly didn't apply anywhere else. It was kind of one of those things where like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this program, etc. So that's what got me to SMU, the MBA program. While I was there, it happened that an individual in the investor relations role at the time left, and this was in late 2018. So I was still doing my MBA, but I was able to show the advancement in my business acumen, as well as my finance acumen and skill set, and through the M.B.A. classes. And so that, in addition to knowing what I touched on earlier, knowing how the different business units operated together, I also was, on the path to receive my M.B.A. and the knowledge base there. It at the time was the perfect fit for the role and what they were looking for. And so I was hired on as manager of investor relations, and finished my M.B.A. in that role.
That's amazing. The professional M.B.A. community is so impressive because you guys work all day in business, in your demanding job, and then you go and sacrifice, 3+ hours every night to, again, advance that career and kind of your own education. Did you find yourself you'd worked at, on the professional side and the business side for a handful of years, right? You're moving your way through the company, through different companies. And like you said, really building this knowledge of how each business interacts with each other, how they work together, how they support each other. Did you find yourself interested in gaining more knowledge and the M.B.A. kind of became more attractive? I know you mentioned that your mentor really kind of guiding you that, hey, this could look good and be helpful for you career-wise. But was it also kind of maybe subconscious that you were like, hey, I actually have a thirst for knowledge?
Agreed.
And then I'm always interested to know those people who are working, what was your kind of focus in grad school? And then how do you compare what you're doing day to day and kind of your real life education that you're getting working versus what you're studying, and how do they differ? How do they complement each other?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I will say at first, it is difficult. Like, it's not easy to work 8 hours and then leave and go to class for additional 3 and then figure out when you're going to study for the exam that's in 2 days, So having time management skills was 100% necessary there. But I will say, yes, there was a thirst for knowledge that I found, and my concentration through the PMBA was in finance, and then I took strategy classes along with finance. And
Awesome.
I was hoping that gaining the finance acumen, that was really going to put me into a new finance type of role, whether at Vistra or not. So I was interested in learning. I was enjoying learning, that is one thing I was nervous about. It was like, I'm about to put a bunch of time and money into this. Am I going to enjoy it? And surprisingly, yes, I loved it. In addition to just learning like the actual scholastic pieces, what I loved about the PMBA, and you kind of touched on this, we're all working professionals. And I loved learning about other people's roles, what they were doing, their businesses, what were they hoping to do. And because we all were able to come to class with different examples that we could provide in certain situations that we can then like relay back or help each other out. It's, that peer-to-peer community was really impactful, as well as, talking through case studies or doing projects, etc. You could take like your real world experience and apply it. But in the reverse of that, taking the scholastic experience and applying that, I'll say I secured the investor relations role at Vistra, and and that was in October, and I think in January I started the valuation course. And that was extremely impactful, right? I was receiving sell-side analyst price of valuations of our stock in real time while taking the valuation course and understanding this is how they're evaluating the company, right? And so I was able to do it. It was extremely helpful in both areas.
That's maybe something I didn't consider enough in the professional MBAs, how you guys are all coming from different industries, different points in your career, and able to kind of collaborate and kind of share some insights that maybe you wouldn't get anywhere else.
I think it's similar. You're creating this network right now with different individuals all sharing the SMU graduate degree and all working from various various companies, that is what you were getting doing the M.B.A. as well. So you were creating your own networking group, if you will, at the time. So it was extremely impactful in learning.
So you enjoy the M.B.A. experience. Simultaneously, you get an amazing opportunity at Vistra. And I imagine as this timeline is going on, pre-M.B.A. into your M.B.A., sustainability investing becomes a much bigger concept, a much bigger part of your world. Can you give us a quick overview of kind of how that's played a role in your career, and then touch on this new chapter, your role with Cresta, and kind of, again, how sustainability impacts the world you live in your career?
Yes. So in investor relations at Vistra, we were getting questions from external stakeholders regarding emissions, especially being a power generator. So the fleet at Vistra still is a very diversified fleet, has coal facilities, has gas facilities, has solar and battery energy storage. And in 2020, in addition to COVID, there was a big push for sustainability, and people began asking questions regarding emissions and your impact on environment, as well as asking questions related to diversity at your company, in addition to just review of your policies and procedures, et cetera. Though I think governance diligence has been around for quite some time, it became part of that ESG bundle. So as in investor relations, we were receiving all of these requests, and we were handling them and managing them. And one day, the executive team at Vistra decided, well, investor relations should just own the sustainability program. And at the time for Vistra, it was more around compliance and reporting and communications. And so we, with a small team, just my boss and myself, we had to now manage what does sustainability look like to the external stakeholder. And so I took that on and developed our first sustainability reporting, developed processes to collect data and information from various groups across the organization, managed through different frameworks that are all voluntary, that were out, there. If I start naming acronyms, people will, confused, but kind of frameworks out there. And mind you, this was all before the SEC started mentioning doing formal reporting. And so all of this was very voluntary, but you saw a big push in 2020, 2021 by companies and corporations providing their stakeholders with this information. And so that was my role, was to collect it and share it. And it was not something that I necessarily knew about. It wasn't something that I looked for. That's similar to starting at TXU. I wasn't really sure what energy was. I turned on my lights at home and was glad it was there, but the meaning behind it. And so similar with sustainability and ESG, I was not familiar with it, but learned it, learned the landscape, the environment, and made sure what at the time Vistra was doing met the needs of our stakeholders. From there, I love, Vistra's a great company. It still is a great company. They have a fabulous team there, and but I was introduced through my network to someone at Cresta, and they were looking for someone to lead their ESG program. I was interested. I think, hopefully everyone's on the same, on a similar mindset, in that, businesses are always for sale. You are always for sale, right? You can always, you should always be seeing what's out there in the market, and seeing how your career could progress. So I took the meeting to understand more about Cresta, what their needs were. I was really intrigued Cresta is a private equity firm. We are based in Dallas. We have about 1.5 billion of asset under management. And some background on Cresta, in addition, was they were formed in 2017. And two of their founding partners actually are SMU grads. One has an undergrad from SMU, and one has his M.B.A. So a connection there. But as a starting in 2017 and starting with Cresta in 2022, it's 5 years later. It's still an emerging manager, right? I would still consider us an emerging manager. We have 2 current funds and are fundraising our third. So we're still in the infancy stages of what does this look like in the future? And I really like the idea of starting somewhere and seeing how I could grow and develop with a company that's also growing and develop. Vistra, again, great. They're traditional. TXU has been around. TU Electric has been around since, I think, 115 years, 50 years. So it's traditional. Things are established. Coming to Cresta, I'm able to develop ideas, processes, create something for the organization.
So what's the difference between your role as investor relations for a public company versus a private equity firm, and kind of what's different, what's the same, and kind of also gives a little overview of what the life is like as in external affairs, investor relations, for those who might be interested in that world?
Sure. So similarities, everyone wants information. That's how you make investment decisions, and everyone wants more information than what you're going to provide them, right? And so I think that's very similar. Is what you're communicating, how you're communicating it is integral into how your investors perceive you. Differences, obviously, in private markets in general, you have a little more freedom and flexibility in your communication practices than you would in the public markets. What's also different that I've experienced is that in public equity, right, someone can move their dollars immediately versus in private, it's contracted and they can't move it, right? So you have them beholden to you for a little bit longer than you would in the public market. So that's been a different dynamic, if you will, and I think that leads into how you are communicating with your investors as well. Both require commitment to transparency, and I will say from the ESG side, there really isn't that much difference in what you're communicating. So I think that has been the same across, right? The ESG factors are the same, whether you're at a public company or you're managing a portfolio company. Investors are still going to ask for emissions data or your diversity metrics, et cetera. So those factors have remained the same. With Cresta, what's unique is that we invest in early stage companies, or in developing companies. Sometimes it's just a management team that is looking to develop infrastructure. And with that is that they're not necessarily going to have ESG practices in place or even the reporting around it. So initially, part of my role at Cresta was setting up what does the ESG program look like for Cresta, and how do we then develop that within our portfolio companies. And so the hands-on engagement with portfolio companies is similar to what I was doing at Vistra, and helping them figure out what are they going to report, how are they going to report, because then they need to report back to Cresta so that we can report to our investors. Again, a lot of this is about reporting. I don't want to minimize it. This is also environmental factors are part of Cresta's investment strategy. So Cresta has one conventional energy fund, which has some companies in the midstream sector, as well as a crude export terminal that's under permitting, and some water infrastructure along oil and gas assets. But then we also are in our sustainable series, and that's what the strategy that we're continuing on right now with our third fundraise. And the sustainable series does have a focus of decarbonization. So what are we doing to help the energy sector, the industrial sector, the ag sector to decarbonize? And the focus for Cresta is not on the electricity. So there's a lot of infrastructure being built already from solar and wind, and that is being managed. But we see that there's a missing piece of the emissions output that is contributed to these harder to abate sectors that electricity necessarily can't solve for today. Now, maybe it can 50 years from now, but it can't today. So we're focused on technologies and solutions that decarbonize current. And decarbonize is not necessarily 100% green either, right? So an investment that we have made is converting a renewable or a conventional diesel facility into a renewable diesel facility. There are still emissions associated with the burning of renewable diesel, but is a lot less than conventional diesel output. So a lot of the infrastructure and assets that Cresta is developing are oil and gas adjacent, fossil fuel adjacent, still part of that overall energy industry, and are complementary to it as well. For example, another one of our portfolio companies focuses on carbon capture and sequestration. So, they could plug into a chemical, an industrial, or a power asset and build infrastructure around it to capture emissions.
So it sounds like you landed at kind of the perfect firm, right? You're able to blend the skill sets that got you to where you are today, but then also kind of marry. It sounds like, maybe assumption, the interest in the sustainability and kind of the future of that space, not only from your reporting, but what Cresta is actually investing in.
Yeah, we're doing some really cool things, and I think what's been fun too for me is formerly it was all power focused, and now I'm seeing and learning much more about the other part of industry, energy, right? And so the other part of the industry, and that has been really rewarding. And I love to learn. I think touching on this earlier on the having the opportunity to learn is important. And I'm constantly learning every day. And so it has been fun, and it's unique, and it keeps me challenged, but it's also a fun challenge.
Yeah, I think we've definitely learned from this conversation. You touch on a few very important topics, right? Your network has played a very important role in your ability to, find new opportunities, but then to continue to expand opportunities from mentorship to your peers. You're not one who shies away from a new challenge, that no matter kind of what's thrown at you, you're going to go at it all in, educate yourself, and empower yourself. I think that's such an important lesson. I'll leave you with kind of one last request of those, Jessica's back in their PB and B.A. What advice do you have for those either studying communications, finance, industry agnostic or energy specific? What kind of last bits of wisdom do you have for those kind of starting out in their career?
I think two big things are to stay curious, because you don't know what you don't know. And this also just goes into constantly learning, right? And asking those questions like, what is that? Why is this? And also to be open-minded. And that's different and curious as far as a career goes, because I was open-minded and I didn't know what electricity was, right? I was open-minded in that I'm entering the private markets. I was not an investment banker, right? I entered a private equity firm. I wasn't sure necessarily all what I was getting into, right? So to remain open-minded in what could your career look like is important. I think sometimes people go in and like, I'm going to be XYZ. And I think that's great, especially in the professional jobs like doctor, lawyer, etc. But when it is, a little more fluid, like a business degree, it is important, I think, to keep an open mind of what that could look like in the future.
Yes, and Jessica, again, thank you for making time to do this. I think you're a perfect example of the SMU alumni and the amazing things they're doing and their ability to work their way through kind of into industry and challenge and have a positive impact. So thank you for sharing your story. Excited to have you on again soon to kind of talk sustainability and Fund 3 and kind of the next wave of things whether with Cresta or, on your own. But again, thank you for the time, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks, Mitch.